Hello friends, welcome to Math Succeed Algebra 1 tutorial. In the previous lesson you learnt about properties of addition. In this lesson you are going to learn about properties of multiplication. These properties are very useful in algebraic expressions. After completing this lesson, you should be able to identify properties of multiplication easily. You are going to learn about commutative property, identity property, inverse property, associative property, multiplicative property of 0, multiplicative property of -1, property of opposites in product, distribution of multiplication over addition. So for each of these properties, I will give you some example for better understanding. Also, instead of traditional multiplication sign, I'm going to use the dot symbol, which means the same thing, that is the product of two numbers. The commutative property says that the product of two numbers a and b is same as the product of b and a. Therefore, change in order of multiplication does not change the result of the product. Now, the commutative property can be extended to numbers more than just 2. Suppose 3 multiplied by 5 equals 15, then the commutative property says that 5 multiplied by 3 is also 15. Changing the order of multiplication have no effect on the result of the multiplication. The identity property states that for a real number a, if a is multiplied with multiplicative identity, which is 1, then you get the same number a, meaning a multiplied by 1 equals 1 multiplied by a equals a. For example, suppose 4 multiplied by 1 equals 1 multiplied by 4 equals 4 only. The inverse property states that if a real number a is multiplied with its inverse, then we get identity element as a result, where multiplicative identity is 1. If a number a is divided by itself, we get 1. The other way to write this is a multiplied by its reciprocal 1 by a, then the result is 1. So this satisfies the inverse property of multiplication. Therefore, the reciprocal of a must be the inverse of a because reciprocal satisfies the inverse property. The associative property states that if a, b and c are three real numbers, then a multiplied by b multiplied by c equals a multiplied by b multiplied by c does not affect the result of the multiplication, meaning grouping of numbers have no effect on the multiplication. So, for example, 2 multiplied by 4 multiplied by 5 equals 40. Then 2 multiplied by 4 multiplied by 5 equals 40. Therefore, grouping of 4 and 5 in the first expression and grouping of 2 and 4 in the second expression has no effect on the result of multiplying the numbers. The associative property can be extended to more than 3 real numbers. So now let's talk about multiplicative property of 0. The multiplicative property of 0 is well known, and it states that when you multiply any real number a with 0, the result is 0 only. So a multiplied by 0 equals 0 multiplied by a is equal to 0 is the multiplicative property of 0. So 16, which is a real number, multiplied by 0 gives us 0. Similarly, the multiplicative property of -1 states that when you multiply a real number a with -1, you get the opposite of that number, meaning a multiplied by -1 equals -1 multiplied by a equals -a. For example, 3 is a real number. So negative 1 multiplied by 3 equals 3 multiplied by negative 1 equals negative 3. So if A and B are two numbers, then A multiplied to B with the opposite sign negative B is equal to negative AB. Also, if A is a negative, that is negative A, then negative A multiplied with B equals negative AB. So if both A and B are negative, meaning negative A multiplied by negative B equals to positive AB. For example, negative 5 multiplied by 7 equals negative 35, which is equal to 5 multiplied by negative 7 equals to negative 35. Also, negative 5 multiplied by negative 7 equals to positive 35. So I already covered the distributive property of addition in the previous video, but let me reiterate the property again with a new perspective. Now, the distributive property of multiplication over addition is a special property that distributes the multiplication over addition of two or more numbers. Suppose A, B and C are three numbers, then A multiplied by B plus C equals to AB plus AC. So you can understand this with an example. If 3, 4 and 5 are three real numbers, then 3 multiplied by 4 plus 5 equals to 3 multiplied by 9 equal to 27, which equals to 3 multiplied by 4 plus 3 multiplied by 5 equals to 12 plus 15 equals to 27. Therefore, the distribution of multiplication over addition does not affect the result. It is still 27. Let's summarize everything that you have learned in this lesson. So you learned about commutative property of multiplication. Then you learned about the identity property of an identity element of multiplication, which is 1. Inverse property of multiplication, which defines inverse to be the reciprocal of a number. Then you learned about associative property, property of 0, property of negative 1. You learned about how multiplication of opposite affect the sign of the product of two or more numbers. Finally, you learned about distributive property.